I'm Maureen Converse. I'm Phil's daughter-in-law. I first met Phil in 1995 when he'd already begun his retirement. So I've known him as Pete's dad, my father-in-law, and as Papa Phil to our children Ned and Aaron. There are three striking things about him that make him, for me, the gracious and great man that he was. The first was his genuine interest in meeting new people and his, along with Jean's, remarkable ability to put them at ease. They did this by focusing on that new person, and it was this that made my introduction to them so memorable. Peter and I had been dating for a while, and he wanted me to meet his parents. On the way to Ann Arbor, I worried about what I would say and how I would be judged. From the moment I entered Jean and Phil's home, I felt welcomed, but more significantly, I felt interesting. I didn't have to worry about what I would have to say to them because they had lots of questions for me, and they seemed to find each one of my answers fascinating. I did not feel judged for one moment, but instead felt valued and at ease. As my relationship with Peter developed, and as Jean and Phil met the many, many Jenningses and Murphys that make up my extended family, I saw them engage with each new person in the same way. Unless you think this is a trivial observation about Phil and Jean, I ask each of you to think about how hard it is to engage in an extended and lively conversation with someone without really talking about yourself. It's hard. But for Jean and Phil, it was effortless because it was sincere. The second meaningful characteristic of Phil was that he always looked ahead and did not live in the past. The Converses love conversation and dialogue, and I was fortunate enough to be part of many of those during the last 20 years. Phil did not use those conversations as an opportunity to talk about his professional experiences and all his accomplishments in order to make a point. In any conversation, he listened, he contributed, he made his points, but he did not use those conversations to focus attention on himself and his achievements. Those achievements, of course, always showed through in the way he carried himself and in his intelligent and astute observations. But he seemed to me to be always living in the present and looking forward, and did not want to or need to derive his happiness and his value from his past achievements. Finally, Phil's most meaningful characteristic was his love and admiration for his family. I've heard the stories of his devotion to his mother and the way he cared for her as she aged. I have seen the fruits of his efforts to preserve the memory and the artistry of his beloved sister Connie. As Papa Phil, I watched him be an engaged and attentive grandfather to Ned and Aaron, whether it was building forts with them, setting up meticulously, I might add, and playing croquet with them at Glen Lake for as long as they wanted, or patiently and honestly answering each and every question they might have for him. Most of all, of course, was his love for Jean. In the years that I knew them, they were inseparable and devoted to each other. My daughter, Erin, tells the beautiful story of Phil's reminiscence in August 2013 while we were all together in Glen Lake. By this time, Phil's memory had declined severely. However, one night, he told us all in exquisite detail how he had met Jean and about the beginnings of their courtship. It was really something. In the last few months of his life, as his world became smaller, having Jean near him was all that mattered, and she was with him until the very end. He was a very lucky man. All these reminiscences about Phil are wonderful, but Phil would want us to think about what meaning his life had for the future. For me, that future is represented by his grandchildren, Ned and Aaron. They love Papa Phil deeply, and I know he has left his imprint on them. We appreciate your presence here today. You honor his memory and his life by being here today, and you impress on his grandchildren the significance of a man who showed them how life can and should be lived. Thank you.